A man who is too kind will one day awaken surrounded by wolves. Friedrich Nietzsche. You're at a dinner table smiling politely while your insides twist in discomfort. A colleague dominates the conversation, making a veiled jab at your work ethic. You laugh it off. Another friend asks for yet another favor, the fourth this week, and you nod without hesitation, even though you're drowning in exhaustion. You drive home later that night, the city lights blurred by the fog in your mind. There's an ache behind your eyes, a quiet scream caught somewhere in your throat. You don't know exactly why you're angry, but you are, and guilty, and confused, because you're supposed to be the good one, the helpful one, the nice one. So why does it feel like something inside you is slowly dying? Now picture this. You walk into a room where everyone smiles when they see you. You're agreeable. You never make waves. You're always willing to help. But then imagine leaving that room and realizing no one truly knows who you are, not even you. You have become a masterpiece of masks, and the worst part, you've worn them so long you've forgotten the shape of your own face. Why do we romanticize being nice as if it's the highest human virtue? What if I told you that behind every compulsively kind person is a history of abandonment, fear, or the desperate need to be seen? That being too nice is often less about goodness and more about survival. We are taught early on to be agreeable, to avoid conflict, to make others comfortable even at the cost of our own. Praise is given to the quiet child, the obedient student, the selfless friend. But in this socially sanctioned martyrdom, a dangerous paradox emerges. The nicer you are, the more invisible you become. Let that sink in. Because niceness, when weaponized against yourself, turns into self-erasure. You nod when you want to scream. You say it's okay when it's anything but. You tolerate when you should rebel. You say yes when every cell in your body is begging you to say no. And each time you do, a small part of you disappears. Not loudly, not with fireworks, but silently, like dust swept under the rug of your own soul. Is being nice still virtuous if it means betraying yourself? Think back. How many apologies have you given just to keep the peace? How many truths have you swallowed for fear of making someone uncomfortable? How many needs have you buried because you didn't want to be a burden? You're not alone. The world is filled with good people quietly breaking under the weight of their own compassion. But here's the question no one dares to ask. At what point does kindness become a cage? We speak often about toxic masculinity, narcissism, power abuse, but rarely do we explore the pathology of chronic self-sacrifice. We don't talk about how nice people often become emotional dumping grounds, how their boundaries are ignored, how their silence is mistaken for consent. We fail to see how the performance of perpetual kindness creates an identity so fragile it shatters the moment one stops being agreeable. Because if you've built your worth on being pleasing, then anger becomes terrifying. Assertiveness becomes guilt. Boundaries feel like betrayal. And so you keep smiling, keep serving, keep being what everyone needs, until one day you wake up and realize you have no idea what you need. What happens to a soul that has spent its entire life dimming itself for others? That's the real cost. Not missed opportunities, not exhaustion, but the slow erosion of the self, and the deeper tragedy, society rewards you for it. You get praise, approval, compliments on how selfless, generous, reliable you are. No one sees the quiet agony behind those eyes. No one asks what you've lost in order to be so endlessly available. So now I ask again, what is the true cost of being too nice? Is it a life where you are liked by everyone, except yourself? Is it a comfort built on conformity, fear, and repressed rage? Is it the perpetual silencing of your truth in exchange for temporary peace? You've felt it, haven't you? That quiet war between wanting to be loved and needing to be free. But how did we get here? How did something as noble as kindness become a silent killer? Let's go back to the beginning, to the psychological roots, the philosophical trap, the silent conditioning, because only by understanding where this begins can we ever hope to break free. Let's return briefly, not to a moment in your life, but to your childhood. Do you remember the first time you disappointed someone you loved? The first time your no was met with disapproval? The first time your anger was punished instead of understood? The first time you were told either through words or silence that your feelings were too much, your desires selfish, your honesty rude? That's where it begins. The hidden cost of being too nice is not a decision, it is an inheritance. A survival mechanism born in the presence of love that felt conditional. You learned that approval was earned, that your worth was transactional, that you were lovable only when you suppressed your edges. This isn't about blame, it's about patterns, because long before you became the one who over-accommodates you were the child who feared abandonment. And long before you became the one who cannot say no, you were the one who equated conflict with danger. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But how can you accept yourself when you've been taught that parts of you are unacceptable? The nice person is often not a whole person. They are a carefully edited version of themselves, shaped by the wounds of childhood, reinforced by a culture that equates kindness with compliance, and nurtured by a society that mistakes meekness for morality." Let's talk psychology. In attachment theory, children develop survival strategies depending on the reliability of their caregivers. If love is withdrawn when they express frustration or assert needs, they quickly learn to inhibit those impulses. They become hyper-attuned to others' emotions. Their antennae are always up scanning for potential disapproval. They become what psychologists call anxiously attached. And as they grow, that anxiety evolves into hyper-niceness, into people-pleasing, into a chronic compulsive kindness designed not to express love, but to avoid loss. Niceness becomes a strategy, not of generosity, but of control. Control over how others see you. Control over whether they stay or go. Control over your safety disguised as selflessness. And here's where it deepens, because it's not just psychology, it's philosophy. It's the architecture of meaning we build around ourselves. And it's cracked. Friedrich Nietzsche warned against the morality of the herd, what he called slave morality. In a world where people are afraid to assert power, strength is rebranded as cruelty and submission as virtue. Niceness becomes a kind of moral camouflage, a way to avoid the discomfort of being disliked, envied, or seen. And so we overcorrect. We amputate our intensity. We dull our clarity. We defang our truth. Not because we are bad, but because we were told over and over again that to be too much is to be unlovable. Arthur Schopenhauer, ever the cynic, wrote that compassion is the basis of morality. But he also believed that humans are driven primarily by will, by desire, by striving, by a fundamental dissatisfaction that can never be fully resolved. What happens when that will is stifled? When you teach a person to deny their desires in the name of being good, they don't become better. They become resentful, anxious, numb. They begin to rot quietly inside their well-mannered shell, because niceness without authenticity is a form of self-abandonment. Aldous Huxley once envisioned a dystopia where everyone is chemically pacified. What he feared wasn't brutality, it was compliance. He feared a society where people are so comfortable, so agreeable, so conflict avoidant that they forget how to be free. Can you see the pattern now? This isn't just a personal flaw, it's a cultural sickness. We live in a world that praises politeness while ignoring pain, that rewards surface harmony while repressing inner chaos, that elevates cooperation while shaming confrontation. So we become experts at reading the room and forget how to read ourselves. We sense when others are uncomfortable, but ignore the ache in our own gut. We apologize for our existence. We smile through disrespect. We call it love. We call it maturity. We call it strength. But it's not. It's fear. Jean-Paul Sartre said that hell is other people. Not because people are evil, but because we often become trapped in how we believe others perceive us. The nice person lives in this hell. They are always adjusting, always calculating, always bending to fit an invisible mold. And the price, they lose access to their own being. Who are you when you're not trying to please anyone? What do you want when you're not filtering every desire through the lens of acceptability? What would you say if you weren't afraid of rejection or judgment or silence? That's the deeper problem. This isn't about kindness. It's about identity, about the slow and silent death of self in the name of social survival. Because when kindness becomes compulsive, it stops being kindness at all. It becomes a prison built of golden bars. So the question remains, how long can a soul survive in a body that no longer says yes from truth, but only out of fear? That is the hidden architecture of the nice person. Not compassion, but compulsion. Not generosity, but obligation. Not love, but performance. But this is only the beginning. Because once you understand how this mask was built, you begin to see the cracks. The fractures that run through every relationship, every unspoken boundary, every smile that hides a scream. And the damage runs deeper than you think. What happens when society is built not on truth, but on chronic politeness? What happens when everyone plays nice, and no one is real? Let's go further. Let's open the curtain even more. Because next we're stepping into the aftermath, the unseen consequences. Are you ready to see the cost the world never told you about? You don't notice it at first. The erosion happens slowly, imperceptibly, like wind carving stone over centuries. You go about your day replying to texts you don't want to answer, saying yes, when your body screams no, offering help, when your soul is gasping for air. And on the surface, you're functioning, smiling, doing fine. But somewhere beneath that agreeable exterior, something ancient and essential is starving. The self. You see, the consequence of being too nice isn't just personal discomfort. It's existential disintegration. Let's call it what it is, self-abandonment. And unlike a dramatic collapse, this kind of abandonment is quiet, socially acceptable, even admired. No one throws you an intervention for being too generous. No one questions why you're always available, always smiling, always agreeable. Instead, they reward you for it. That's the first unseen consequence. You become praised for your own erasure. And that praise, it becomes addictive. Each time someone thanks you for being the bigger person, it reinforces the idea that your value lies in submission. That your worth is measured not by authenticity, but by how much you can give without breaking. But you are breaking. Not in loud cinematic ways, but in moments you don't even recognize, when you feel exhausted after spending time with people you claim to love. When you dread phone calls from certain friends because they only call when they need something. When you feel guilty, actually guilty, for taking even one day to yourself. This isn't compassion, it's internalized servitude, and it gets worse. Psychologists call it fawning a trauma response, where a person appeases others to avoid conflict or rejection. It's what happens when fight or flight isn't available, so your nervous system chooses a third option: submission. You say what they want to hear. You anticipate needs before they're voiced. You shapeshift into the most palatable version of yourself. Over time, you stop knowing where you end and others begin. Your identity becomes water flowing into the needs of everyone around you, never held, never defined. This blurring leads to the second consequence: boundary collapse. Without boundaries, your life becomes an open field. Everyone is welcome. Everyone can enter. Everyone can take. And they do. Not because they are malicious, but because you have taught them that your needs don't matter. You become the reliable one, the strong one, the one who doesn't mind, the one who's so easygoing, and slowly, imperceptibly, you vanish. This disappearance has a cost, not just emotionally, but neurologically. Your brain rewires itself to fear conflict. Neuroscience tells us that chronic people-pleasing can alter the brain's threat response system. The amygdala, your brain's alarm bell, becomes hypersensitive to disapproval. Your body begins to treat rejection like danger. So what happens? You avoid it at all costs. You become risk-averse, not just in relationships but in dreams, in career choices, in creative expression. You don't pitch the idea, you don't take the lead, you don't speak your truth in the meeting. You wait to be asked, you wait to be chosen, you wait for permission that will never come. Because here's the terrifying truth. The person who's always trying to be liked can never truly be loved. Why? Because you can't be loved for who you are if you never show who you are. This leads to the third consequence, relational decay. At first, your relationships flourish. You're easy to be around, accommodating, low maintenance. But as time goes on, something strange happens. You start to resent the very people you've given everything to. Why? Because they don't reciprocate, because they don't see you, or because you never gave them the chance. You trained them to expect everything and give nothing. You said it's fine so many times they believed you. You hid your anger so well they assumed it didn't exist. You watered yourself down until the person they loved wasn't even real. And now every interaction feels hollow, because behind your smile is a scream. That scream, the one you've been suppressing for years, doesn't go away. It metastasizes, sometimes into anxiety, sometimes into depression, sometimes into autoimmune disease or chronic fatigue or other psychosomatic manifestations. Why? Because the body keeps the score. As trauma therapist Bessel van der Kolk put it, the emotions you repress don't disappear. They lodge themselves in your muscles, your gut, your breath. They live inside you as tension, illness, and fatigue. Your niceness is making you sick. Not metaphorically, literally. And the most tragic consequence of all, you forget who you could have been. There is a version of you that never made themselves small to be accepted. A version who said what they meant, who burned bridges when necessary, who chose truth over comfort, who risked being disliked to live in integrity. That version of you didn't die. They're still there. But every time you said yes to avoid discomfort, every time you hid your anger to keep the peace, every time you minimized your pain to make someone else feel better, you buried that version deeper. Until now, perhaps? Until this moment, where you start to feel the ache of everything you've lost by being endlessly nice. Can you feel it? The anger that was never expressed, the needs that were never met, the boundaries that were never drawn, the life that was never truly lived. You've been asleep in your own skin, trapped in a dream of approval, haunted by the fear of disconnection. But what if you woke up? What if you allowed yourself to feel the full weight of your resentment, your desire, your power? Because underneath that mask of niceness is a fire, and it's time to burn. But how? How do you unlearn a lifetime of accommodation? How do you reclaim the self you buried beneath other people's comfort? You rebel. You revolt against every script you were handed. You shatter the illusion that kindness must come at the cost of self. You become dangerous, not to others, but to the systems that fed on your silence. Now, it's time for rebellion, to tear off the mask, to remember who you are beneath the politeness. Ready? Let's begin. It begins with a tremble. The first time you say no and mean it, your voice might shake. Your hands might sweat. Your body may rebel. Every cell trained in the art of appeasement will scream that you're doing something wrong, that you're risking everything love-safety connection. But you're not. You're reclaiming it. Because the rebellion begins not with anger toward others, but with mercy for yourself. And mercy in this case is fierce. It requires you to break the pact you made long ago, the one that said, I will be lovable only if I'm agreeable. Here's the truth. You don't become free by being less kind. You become free by becoming more honest. That's the first act of rebellion, radical honesty. Not cruelty, not careless outbursts, but the kind of honesty that says, this is who I am. This is what I feel. This is what I need. Most people mistake this for selfishness. That's because they've only seen kindness when it's cloaked in self-denial. But there's another kind, what Viktor Frankl might call authentic responsibility, where you honor both yourself and others without betraying either. And here's the paradox. When you stop performing niceness, you start living truthful love. Not the brittle love built on obligation and fear, but the fierce, clear love that says, I respect you enough not to lie to you. The second act of rebellion, boundaries as sacred architecture. A boundary is not a wall, it's a door. It doesn't shut the world out. It protects the parts of you that the world never learned to hold. Most people think boundaries are rude. But let's be precise. A boundary is a promise to yourself. It says, I will not stay in conversations that drain me. I will not say yes when I mean no. I will not abandon myself to earn belonging. Each time you set one, the earth shakes a little. You may lose people, but you will gain something infinitely more vital: clarity. You'll begin to see who loves you for your truth and who only loved you for your silence. That's the third act, learning to be misunderstood. If you're going to be free, you must grieve the fantasy that everyone will approve of your awakening. They won't. Some people loved your compliance more than they loved you. When you stop shrinking, you threaten their comfort. When you stop performing, you reveal their expectations. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them misunderstand. Let them go. Jean-Paul Sartre said, freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. This is what you do. You become whole again, and wholeness means reclaiming the parts of you you buried to survive. So go find your anger, not to weaponize it, but to listen to it. Because anger, true anger, isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It tells you where your boundaries were crossed. It tells you what matters. It tells you that you are alive. Let yourself be loud. Let yourself disappoint the people who benefit from your silence. Let yourself make space. Because space is the fourth act of rebellion, creating a life that fits you. Too many of us live inside containers designed by others. Career paths chosen to please parents. Relationships tolerated to avoid loneliness. Friendships maintained out of guilt. But rebellion means redrawing the map. It means asking, what do I actually want? What do I believe in? What kind of life would I build if I weren't trying to be acceptable? And then slowly, deliberately, you build it. You start small, saying no to a request, telling the truth in a hard conversation, resting without guilt, cutting ties with energy vampires, prioritizing your joy. And with each act, you remember a little more of who you are. The rebellion is not a single moment. It's 1,000 micro-choices. It's waking up every day and refusing to disappear. It's rewriting your internal commandments. I am allowed to take up space. I am allowed to be loved without earning it. I am allowed to protect my peace. I am allowed to be complex, contradictory, messy, and still worthy. Aldous Huxley warned us of a world numbed by comfort, silenced by consensus. The rebellion is choosing discomfort for the sake of your aliveness. Because comfort is not always peace. Sometimes comfort is just quiet despair, and peace is the electric silence after truth has been spoken. That's the real prize. Not just freedom from others' expectations, but freedom from your own inherited scripts. This is what people rarely say about healing. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about shedding who you never really were. The rebellion is a return to the bold, wild, messy, magnificent self that existed before the world told you who to be. So stop apologizing. Stop performing. Stop contorting yourself into someone else's idea of goodness. Because the world doesn't need more agreeable people. It needs more real ones. It needs people who speak with fire in their chest and tenderness in their eyes. People who can say no without guilt and yes without fear. People who know that authenticity is the highest act of love. That's what you're becoming. Not cruel, not cold, but clear, alive, whole. So breathe. Look in the mirror. Feel your own presence and ask yourself, if I didn't care whether they liked me, what truth would I finally speak? That's where we're going. To the place where truth lives. To the final veil. Because the rebellion was never the end, it was only the door. And now we step into the ultimate truth, the deepest realization. There is a moment, if you're lucky, when the noise falls away. Not the external noise, that's always there. But the inner noise, the relentless voice urging you to please, to appease, to shrink. And in that silence, something stirs, something ancient, something feral, not a thought, not a feeling, a knowing. You were never meant to be nice. You were meant to be true. This is the final terrifying, liberating realization. Being too nice wasn't your virtue. It was your cage, and you were the one holding the key the whole time. Because behind all the people-pleasing was a sacred lie. The lie that said, if I'm good enough, quiet enough, giving enough, I'll be safe. But safe from what? From rejection. From abandonment, from conflict, from the agony of not being chosen. And here's the truth your nervous system never got to hear. You are allowed to be unsafe, if it means being whole. Yes, you might be judged. Yes, people might walk away. Yes, some bridges might burn. But let them, because what you gain in return is nothing short of resurrection. You begin to feel again not just anxiety or resentment, but joy. Play, desire, hunger. You begin to notice your own breath. You look in the mirror, and for the first time in years, you see not a performance, but a presence. You remember that you are real, that you have preferences even if they displease others, that you have edges even if they make people uncomfortable, that you are allowed to exist not for their benefit, but for your own becoming. This is the ultimate rebellion. To become unapologetically yourself. Not the curated self, not the masked self, not the socially optimized self, but the raw, inconvenient, glorious, truthful self. And this self doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait to be chosen. It chooses itself, not out of arrogance, but out of a deep, bone-deep understanding that you are the only person who has to live your life. Everyone else is just a visitor. And you've spent too many years redecorating your soul to make visitors comfortable. No more. You don't owe them your silence. You don't owe them your pleasantness. You don't owe them the extinction of your truth so they can sleep peacefully. Because here's the twist. The world never needed your niceness. It needed your authenticity. Your yes that comes from joy, not obligation. Your no that rises from clarity, not guilt. Your rage when injustice burns through your chest. Your sorrow when grief cracks open your ribs. Your voice unfiltered, trembling wholly. You were never meant to be liked by everyone. You were meant to wake the sleeping, to disrupt the scripts, to challenge the comfort of conformity. You were meant to say the thing no one else would say, to cry in rooms where silence is expected, to laugh too loudly, to speak too boldly, to walk away when staying would cost you your soul. That is not cruelty. That is not selfishness. That is integrity. The integrity of the soul, refusing to be a shadow in its own story. You are not here to be agreeable. You are here to be whole. And wholeness, as Carl Jung taught, is not the triumph of light over darkness. It is the union of both. It is the moment you stop amputating parts of yourself to be palatable. It is the day you say, I am this, and this, and this too. Angry, soft, boundaried, generous, loud, tender, complex. That's the final truth. You are not one thing, you are a constellation, and anyone who demands you to dim your light so they can shine brighter is not your sky. So step out. Let your no echo. Let your yes roar. Let your joy be wild. Let your truth be sharp. Because the world does not need another well-behaved ghost. It needs you flesh and flame and all. Let the mask fall. Let the performance end. Let the soft, furious, unrelenting truth rise from the center of your being. You are not here to survive people's approval. You are here to live a life that belongs to you. Not someday. Now. Because here's the final paradox, the one that will haunt and free you. The price of being truly loved is being truly seen. And you can't be seen if you keep hiding behind nice. So stop hiding. Let them see you. And if they walk away, let them. Because what stays after the mask falls, what remains when there's nothing left to prove, what is born when you choose truth over comfort, that is you, unmasked, undone, unstoppable. Now go, not to find yourself, but to remember who you were before the world convinced you to forget. And if your voice trembles as you speak that first defiant truth, let it. Even earthquakes begin with a tremor.